Earlier this year, I did something I didn't really think I was going to do at the beginning of the year. It was during one of the first lockdowns in UK history. It was one of the biggest national health emergencies we've ever had, and probably some of the most difficult stages of my life. I was going through it. The roles, the emotions, the difficulties and the challenges. It was all happening. I was being pushed, shoved, and thrown in every direction you could have thought of. But I did something and made a decision on something that, on a personal level, is pretty huge. And I don't think I was the only person over the lockdown period that made such a decision. If they regret it now or not is another question. And that decision I made a video about. I fully fledged announced it on Instagram. I made it very public that I was doing such a thing. And today we're going to go over that. And that big decision was to change my sexual status to non-binary. A word that not many people know the meaning of, which is why I'm putting a definition on your screen. But also a decision that I thought was going to change my life forever. Today, I want to sit down and go over this. I want to talk about how it had changed me, if it affected me, how I've mentally felt since I've made that decision, and if it's got rid of all the insecurities that I originally spoke about it making. And for the people who didn't know this is going to be a pretty shocking video. I feel like an intro to this is not really necessary. I feel like it's a bit inappropriate to start making intros about a video that is so personal. But before we start, I just need to clarify what non-binary really means. Non-binary is a status of gender identity in which I do not identify with either male or female gender. I'm completely neutral. I do not believe that I contain genetics or characteristics of either a male or female body. I believe I contain characteristics of both genders. And I could, and sometimes do, change my physical and psychological appearance to match that. People do this all the time. It's a very common thing to change your status from male to female or to non-binary, or even your sexual love relationship status to either gay, straight or lesbian. But what is not common is to sit here a few months later after changing your identity status and tell the world that it didn't really make much difference to your entire life. Shocking, I know. I sat here last week, and I really sat here and thought to myself, I was looking through my Instagram, looking through my IGTV stories and all this other garbage, and I was like, I completely forgot that I'd even changed my sexual status. Completely forgot I even did that. I watched back my Insta story, and I watched back what I sent my mum and my dad and my sister when I made the decision. I generally brought a tear to my eye because the fact that I'd made such a decision and basically completely forgot about it was pretty insane. The stomach started to turn, and I was like, man, that's something you don't announce or unless you're going to stick to. Now don't get me wrong, I still abide by the idea that that's my gender status, and I'm not changing it today. That's the last point of this video. The point of this is to explain the differences and how, in reality, it didn't really make much difference to my mental or physical life. Now, for most people out there, when they do such a thing, they do come away from it feeling very different, having, different feelings about themselves, maybe feeling more confident or more with their own self, feeling like they're who they should be. And that's exactly what I expected to happen when I decided to do this myself. But here's what actually happened. After that decision, I come away from it very joyful, very happy, very over the moon. Yes, I've done something to help myself. This is a very positive thing. And I was quite proud of my own achievements. But over the weeks, I started to realise that I had to integrate this into my daily life. And integrating it meant giving myself a girl name. I haven't even done that yet. It meant telling my friends and family and everyone else about it. It also meant that when I was filling in forms or contracts or applying for jobs or working with organisations, even doing my brands, that I couldn't state myself as male anymore. I had to put non-binary. Now, I should have been very confident to do that, considering I was confident enough to make it public to the internet. Surely I'm confident enough to pull it on a form. But oh boy, I wasn't. For the first time in my entire life, I realised the effects of being different. And how really painful it is to have to admit that you're not the same as everyone else. I remember applying for something online and that dreading box of what gender are you? Normally not very dreadful for most. For me, it was a very big moment. And I sat there just for a minute. This was like a week after I'd announced that I was doing it. I really sat there, stared at that form and thought to myself, if I put non-binary right now, what the frick are people gonna think? Now, in the real world, if I take away all the thoughts I had in that moment, all the anxiety I had in that moment, no one would have probably judged me for putting that there. They would have probably looked at the form and been like, yeah, whatever. But in my head, it was such a big thing to do, and mentally, I just wasn't ready to do it. So I made the dreadful choice of just selecting male and moving on. Now, under non-binary, I am allowed to do that. I can choose whether I want to put male or female whenever I want. There's not really a bias of what I have to put. The only problem is, if I decided to apply for a job and I put female and then I walked in there looking like a male, might get a few looks. And this is where the problem come in. I felt like every time I stated that I wanted to be non-binary to someone, I had to explain myself. If they didn't understand non-binary, I had to give them this entire explanation of what non-binary really was. And that's a lot of energy, that's draining, it's anxiety provoking, and I hated it. I did it for a couple of days after announcing it, and then I gave up because it was just dragging me down the pit holes. But yeah, it was a very big hit to the face. I didn't like the fact that not many people in society understood it. Every time I went up to someone and they would just kind of call me a male, and I'd sit there in my head thinking, well, I'm not a male. You kind of just assumed I'm a male. How dare you? And then I was like, wait, I would assume people were male or female. Like, you just judge people by the way they look. And you continuously go down that thought cycle of, are they doing something wrong or am I just an unusual human being? It kills you. So in the end, I just kind of stopped. I kind of stopped professing the idea that I was non-binary, kind of gave up with it. Any form or anything that I did in my life, I kind of just stated I was male and it was over. Because I just couldn't be arsed, if I was honest. If I become a bit closer to someone, they started checking out my social, or, there was a bit more of an intimate interaction, I might have told them, my current girlfriend is aware. But, like, with professional relationships, new friends, new, acquaintances, I didn't even bother. And then I started to question myself again. Because I was like, wait, if I'm not telling everyone, if I'm not putting it on forms, if I'm not acting like it, if I'm not wearing makeup when I go out in the street, am I really non-binary? And then I start questioning my gender all over again. And we go through the same process that I went through years ago when I was on the edge of going transgender. And I'm now in a position where I know what to do. This decision should have made me feel more comfortable in myself, and no clue did I think that it wouldn't. It hasn't changed a thing. If I'm perfectly honest, it hasn't changed a thing. I'm still insecure about how skinny I am. I still sometimes question whether I'm truly masculine, and all these other things are still relevant, which hurts a tiny bit, not gonna lie. I mean, it doesn't affect my ability to do anything, or like, I'm not sitting here crying about it every night. But there is a tight punch up the heart every time I have to explain to someone that I'm male, or someone asks me my gender. Because I am reminded that I'm meant to be telling them that I'm non-binary, and I'm still not. If I'm honest, it's fear. And it's fear provoked by something that society created. Stereotypes. Let's all be honest, just for a second. When you look at someone, you immediately pretty much assume they're either male or female. You know, generally, if they're skinny, they've got boobs and they've got a bum, or they're, you know, got long hair, all this other stuff, you generally assume they're a female. You look at a male, got short hair, quite bulk, or quite tall, or quite skinny, you know, got a deeper voice. Immediately assume, yeah, that's a male. Don't even think twice about it. You don't even have to ask someone their gender, because you already immediately assume that they're either one or the other. And I can understand this, you know, as humans developing, we didn't really concept differently. It was kind of just two genders, you're either one or the other. But as society has developed, we've all kind of learnt that we're all a bit more different than we think. New things have come into the concoctions, and there's probably many genders that I'm not even aware of. Which is why forms in workplaces and contracts and everywhere else has to put a box now, I think it's actually part of the UK law, that they have to have a box saying, or other, so you can type in what gender you are. Also under the UK law now, you know, there's diversity laws. You're not allowed to be judged based on your gender, race, or wherever else. They have to take you as an individual and not judge you by anything else, which is perfect. Well done, UK. But there's another issue. That law is not enforced. You know, let's be real here for a second. What business is getting observed to make sure that they're following diversity laws? Not one. Any employer can look at someone and be like, yeah, you're black. I'm not employing you. It's not like they've got to tell them that, you know, they're not employing them because they're black. They could just say, oh, well, you don't fit the criteria. Like, they're not going to get caught, are they? Or if they don't like their gender, they could be like, well, sorry, mate, you can't do the job. We just don't think you're good enough. In reality, they're sitting there like, yeah, he's male, he can't do the job. And I bet you now, I mean, I don't have any evidence, don't get me wrong. But considering what's happened this year with Black Lives Matter and all the racial controversies that's kind of been stirred up, it's pretty clear that it is definitely happening. And for the first time in my life, it kind of hurt me a little bit. Made me really realise that society has become a bit messed up in terms of stereotypes and judgment. We assume things way too often. Even with mental health, if we go back to what I love, you can't lie to yourself that when you go up to someone, you immediately assume that they're mentally healthy. You don't take into consideration that they even could have mental health issues. Doesn't even pop into your head. You don't want to immediately assume that. But you also don't want to immediately assume that they're perfectly normal, because no matter what way you look at it, you're going to offend them. Because if I go up to a perfectly healthy human being or a person who hasn't got mental illnesses or mental disorders and say, treat them like a perfectly normal human being, like they're healthy, they might get offended because I'm not taking their health condition into consideration. But then if I go up to someone who is healthy and immediately assume that they do have a mental health condition, they're also going to get offended because I'm then treating them like they're insane, as society states, which is completely wrong. It's just a big mess. The entire idea of consumption, assumption, and stereotypes is just one big issue in society that even scientists and, you know, behavioural professionals don't know how to solve. I don't even think the UK government has got a plan on how to solve it. They were just like, right, people, here's a law, follow it. Everyone in society never followed it. And there's no way to enforce it. Like, what are the government going to do? Like, tell police to start knocking on everyone's door being like, yo, you following diversity laws? Like, they're just not going to do that. We literally rely on social behaviour to have these laws enforced. That's like relying on a cow and another cow to mate to make babies. If they're male and male, they're not going to make babies, but if they're male and female, there's like a chance that they might make babies. It just doesn't work, does it? And the mental health consequences, the physical health consequences of these stereotypes, assumptions, exceptions is crazy. And we've seen it this year with the Black Lives Matter protests. I even had to delete a video off my channel. I made a video on Black Lives Matter because I realised that everything I was talking about in that video could be taken so out of context. That proves how complicated this entire mess is. And I just really wanted to express this today. The main point of this video was to kind of express the fact that my non-binary game is very low. And the entire thing has not affected me one bit. But also to express that I'm finally starting to realise, as a white human being, you know, the stereotypical white guy who doesn't understand racism, is unemployed, and begs for burgers every day, I realise how much it hurts to be different. I do. It's not easy. And it's definitely something that needs to be fixed. How we're going to fix it is a question I don't even think the highest level of behavioural social specialists even know about. But it does need to be fixed. So what I'm going to do today, I want everyone who's watching this video, if you've been through something very similar to me, or you have similar problems around racism, around gender equality, or, you know, anything about what we've been talking about today, I think today has been such widespread, go down below, check me out on Instagram and DM me about it. I want to hear your guys' stories. If I'll actually reply or not depends on how I think of your profile and how you writ the message and everything else. Basically, if I feel safe. But I want to hear your guys' stories, as long as you don't mind sharing it with me. Because I want this to become a bit more aware in society. I think more people need to understand that assumptions, stereotyping and all this garbage is really hurting people. So guys, go to my Instagram or even just leave a comment on this video, whatever you feel like is easier, and tell me your stories. And let's try and raise a bit of awareness for the people who are judged by what they seem like to be, but not what they truly are.